I was up on a helmet and I was looking down at myself. I was in bed. I was about 13, 12. And I was looking at myself literally on the bed. And then I felt when it went back into me, I was like jolted away. Very weird feeling.
In the middle of the night, I would feel I'd be like a dream, but powerful, something trying to pull me to get me. That bad, it was horrible, and I'd fight and I'd fight and I'd fight, and this force just kept, not physically, but something was, it was almost trying to steal my soul kind of feeling.
Okay, so we're more than the physical body. The emotional, mental, energetic body, etheric body, light body, causal body. It's not that we have a soul, we are souls. So what we call souls can also be seen as your astral body in some sense. The lower form of the soul is the astral body. That astral body contains the mental, emotional, and the energetic. So when you, like an outer body experience, is basically that body just disconnecting from the physical body. So you're able to separate that body. So like if you think of the Russian dolls, so you've just taken the one lot out of the big doll. So the big doll is the physical one, and you got all the others in there, and you just took all of those other little ones out and left the big doll there. So that's on the outer body experiences where your energetic body leaves the physical body. But it's still connected, so it will always be connected. You're always protected. Once again, it's part of who you are already. That is like a physical or like an outside view of what we are. So the energetic body having a look at the physical body, but the physical body maintains. We have the astral body in us already now. So all our astrals, but they just very focused together in the physical. They're anchored in the physical.
So really scary.
Yeah, normally it happens with sleep paralysis. Body asleep, mind awake. So when your mind wakes up, but the body is asleep, that's a precursor to the outer body experience. It is also the in-between stage. So the stage just before you fall asleep. So where the body is already relaxed and actually asleep, but the mind's still going, there's a small little window. What happens with that is that you wake up in that window, but the body and the rest doesn't wake up. So the mind wakes up. And that basically connects us to the astral realms. So that's like what you're sensing could be energies from the astral realms. Because around the earth, there's the inner planes. So they call it the inner astral planes. There's a lot of words for these things, different ideas, different things. But if you think of the solar system as the inner planes, and then beyond that, there's the outer planes, which is the cosmic planes. But the inner planes around the earth, basically every separate body that we have lives in a world. It's the same as a physical body in a physical world. There's your mental body that lives in the mental world. There's the emotional body that lives in the emotional world. There's an astral body that lives in the astral world. Okay, I hesitate and pause because it's just like a disclaimer. A lot of what I'm saying now is also that's from outside, not inside. So outside information is esoteric information, belief systems, all that kind of stuff. Not direct personal experience. So the general idea with the astrals is what you can call 7 heavens, 7 hells. That's the description of the different layers of the astral, which can range from very low vibration, which we call hell, all the way up to the planes that we call heaven. So the inner planes are astral planes. They go from very low vibration to very high vibration. And there's a lot of things involved with that. So your entities and elementals and all those also connect through those levels. But then all the spirits or the ghosts or whatever, that's also a very close layer to the physical normal plane. So when we very caught up in our own lives and we have the needs and wants and desires and lust and all the other stuff, when we pass over, it's not a complete reset. So you still remember, feel, think, you still, the I is still the I, the soul is still the soul, but it's a lot clearer because now you connect it to the wider range of knowledge. But if you limit yourself in this life, so very staunch beliefs, whatever, so if you believe in a hell and you believe that you are a sinner and you believe that that's so much, when you actually die, you carry on that belief, because in the astral planes or the energetic planes or the spiritual planes, whatever you want to call them, thoughts become real very quickly. Thoughts are things, so wherever your travels, the outer body travels, OBEs, you just think of something and you're there. So you're moving with the power of the mind. So you're using your mind to create and recreate and manifest things quickly. So on Earth, it takes us years to manifest something because we have to get it down. The energy has to condense into matter for us to experience that as a manifestation. There, the energy has to manifest as a thoughts form. So it's a lot quicker and easier to do. So whatever you believe or whatever you see for yourself, when you pass over, that's where you will be. So that's why people will see heaven or hell or meet their loved ones or whatever you resonate with. The higher vibrational entities and states, unconditional love, whatever source, that presents itself for you to understand.
So, sorry, Ali, is that then the force that was pulling Karen, that she feels something was pulling her? Because I'm not quite with you with all these realms and the...
Yeah.
So if, in plain English, that could be their force. Right?
So in plain English, it could be a negative entity. I call them others, the others. Because you don't want to give them too much power. You don't want to. We have lots of.
They take you while you're down, while you're weak.
Yeah, because I was in a...
Yeah, if you're in a bad state, you're putting out anxiety, fear. They feed on fear, all of that stuff.
And you're vulnerable,
and you're open to it. So remember that you're always sovereign. Nothing can attack you, take anything away from you unless you give it permission at a certain level. So conscious, subconscious, unconscious, superconscious, any one of those levels, if you open a door for an entity to attach to you, then they're going to. If you're willing to feed them on some level, they will feed. Because like the lower entities will feed on fear, the higher entities will feed on love.
And then how come it went away?
Okay, let's just take a step back, because it can be that. So at one level, it can be what I call greetings from the others. Okay, that's on one level. If you go down a level, it could be subconscious. In the in-between, you're also in the trance state. And you have different levels of trance states. In a trance state, when we relax, we open up for the subconscious things to present as well. So instead of external entities attacking you or others greeting you or whatever you want to call it, It can be subconscious things that your shadow that wants to be seen. There's fear. So it could be, in that case, your anxiety, your guilt, and all those things. So those will all be subconscious fears that in that in-between state or in that trance state will arise so that you can have a look at them. If you resist and push them away, then they will pull more and more. And you fight them more and more. And then it feels like it's a demonic attack or evil entities or a greeting or a greeting from the others. So it can be both.
My understanding of it sort of in story form is I think that when we're in a state of trauma, so just, one of the things, like, I don't like to call this layer of beings entities, because for exactly what the reason you've said, is like one part of being is being equal. So when we start to believe we're superior to other forms of energy, we start creating a hierarchy that I think is not so healthy. So I think a really important start is that if we accept that we are all equal and we greet one another and we give everyone sort of the credit for being an energy form, it is sort of a step to unhooking the power that the thought of what people would call an entity, we unhook part of the fear of that. So with those lower energy beings, they are trauma beings in my understanding. And that when we are in some state of trauma or distress, like the woman has just been speaking about, we often quite unconsciously reach out and start bargaining or trying to, like, I think we've probably all been in a situation where something happens and we kind of look up to God and we'll say, I'll do anything, God, if you just whatever, make my child breathe or take this away or whatever it is. And these trauma beings step in at those times. And we are consciously making a contract with them of they take this away from us and they give us X. And so in my understanding, that's where we are making contracts. And that's how we lose our soul parts. So we make a contract that go, okay, you're going to do this for me. And they want some part of us and they take that part of us. And I think for me, my understanding is that's what part of the Akashic Records is about, is keeping tally on what those contracts are. And so when we do soul retrieval and we work with these beings and we renegotiate the contract and remove them from, because the contracts also last lifetimes. It's not just for now. So whatever contracts we've made carry through lives. So that's why, often these contracts will be made like in a situation of war or some big trauma. And then in this lifetime, we have physical problems that carry on with those old contracts. That's my understanding of it. So that's why it's quite good to have the assistance of someone who can help you renegotiate contracts, reclaim the soul parts back. Because part of the, just, I like to not sit in a field of fear with the lower vibrational beings. And part of what sort of settles me about it is that when you ask for something, one of the spiritual laws is that it has to be shown. So when you ask these beings to show themselves, they have to step forward and they have to tell you what they have. So you can't kind of have the wool pulled over your eyes and be duped. It's quite a transparent, open field if you have the ability to get into it. And then you renegotiate the contract, and it's very important that the contract is then destroyed. because all parts of that contract have to be annihilated. And then you claim your soul parts back and the work is finished. So it's, for me, that piece around these beings of the underworld always, in my experience, have a connection to trauma. And it's when we're a little bit out of our mind or a little bit desperate and we're ready to bargain with anything, that then it's a symbiotic relationship at the time. It just then lasts very often much longer than we anticipate because we don't clean up after ourselves. I don't know if that's of any use.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. At the highest level, it's all other us's. In the one is all is one and one is all. So at a very deep level, those us's are also us. You meet yourself at your own level, at the other us's, but you see in them a reflection of you, the source and oneness. So you're on the same, so you give them the same respect. So you don't put them on a pedestal and you don't dismiss them. So you meet them one-on-one because at the highest level, they are just another part, individuation that shows you another part of yourself. The sleep paralysis thing, or that can really feel like you being attacked, and good to call in the helpers from all sides, other higher us's, so which we will call angels or JC or Ascended Mars or whatever, any one of the higher, your higher self, source, any one of the shall we say, positive side to balance the negative side. But also all on the same level, not same understanding and vibration, but we're all equally valid in existence. So everything that exists has equal value in existence. But some of them are just a lot more powerful, and some of them are know the other realms much better than we do. So yes, call them in, but also remember that you're sovereign. Your life force, your individuation of the source, that spark of the divine that you are, is a sovereign entity as well by itself. So you can't, nothing can take you over, and you can't really take anybody else over as well, unless they give you permission. Like to see like soul contracts. So contracts can be on very many different levels. As we come in, before we incarnate, we, as a soul, will decide what do we want to experience this lifetime. And if we look at that, we'll go, okay, for me to experience what it's like to be a parent, that would be your soul path for this lifetime. And then certain people will connect with you along the way for you to be able to experience that in your life, in whatever form it is. But a lot of what we call traumas, the events, first of all, they neutral events, once again, and it's our perspective. But our perspective of a certain event will be a catalyst for us to remember something or to go deeper in ourselves and to experience. So that is the contract that we have with various entities, energies, states of being, whatever it is. So the events are there for us to learn, to first notice, acknowledge, and to learn from. And then use that to apply and change our lives in a way that we are that we grow up towards the light. So nothing but gifts and blessings comes our way in many forms, but not that we see them that way all the time. But if you decided like, okay, this lifetime I want to learn everything as quick as possible, give it to me, then we'll see it as a very hard lifetime that we had to go through, that we had to endure a lot of stuff. But that was part of the contract as well, because you asked for it. It's like, so I want to go get this one done, so give it to me, and then, well, that's what you asked for.
You said that's what we asked for.
Yeah. So
I was abused in my marriage, physically, mentally, in any form that you can imagine, except the sexuality. Is that you meaning I asked for that?
okay, now remember that I'm talking very high level before you income as a soul contract.
Okay.
Okay. There can be different ways for you to experience different events. Okay, so when you're dealing with an event that seems to be traumatic, which any form of abuse is, obviously, that's very traumatic for us. There's various ways and various levels to go work on that through the different bodies. So the emotional, there's emotional things that go with that, mental, energetic, spiritual. So it goes up and down. So it's not an easy one-line answer. And it's not pointing fingers to you, say, if I say that you agreed to that, or that it was like, that's a horrible thing to say, because it's not something that we want.
Yeah.
So like saying that we want pain and trauma in our lives is not where it's meant, not at that level, because it's not a conscious decision. Just remember it's always on the spectrum. So an event can be seen, an event is an event. So somebody said something to you, that's an event. Okay. Your interpretation of that is the meaning you give that event. So if somebody says you're stupid, okay, that's an event, so that was words that were spoken. How that makes you feel and how you understand it and from which way and depends on how many ways you can see that will influence and affect how you respond to that. So if you feel vulnerable and somebody tells me that, so I'm vulnerable at the moment, I'm not quite sure where I am, somebody says, why don't you just say, no, you're stupid, you're talking crap, you don't know what you're talking about. From a vulnerable position, they confirm what I'm saying or to myself or you.
Okay.
So that's one level of it. Because you feel unworthy by somebody saying that to you,
Makes it stronger.
that makes it strong, makes it real, because that becomes real then in this life. It's confirmed. Okay. But you can also look at that and then just look at the other person who said it, because it's just the event, it's neutral. It's words that were said. But where did it come from them? Did it come from their hurt, their pain? Did they lash out because they in pain? They felt unseen, vulnerable.
So what I realize now is after many years.
Yeah. But we take it personally. So whenever there's a way, we take it very personal. And it's very difficult to step back and have different looks. But what is the gift and where? Because remember that there's always the spectrum between fear and love. At the at the core, the fundamental level, those are the two states, fear and love. So whatever, and remember that on a spectrum, everything contains, the one contains the other. So if you fear something, you love something. If you love something, you fear something. Okay, so it's the yin yang, dark light. There's always a bit of the one in the others. In any event, you're on the spectrum of that, between fear and love. So what was the fear that you had from that event, from those words? You're stupid. What's the fear that comes up from me? But also, what's the love that comes up from me? Because in that moment, I can actually look at myself and go, you know, you really don't think much of yourself. Is that true? Then you can start looking at your belief systems. What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about the other person? What do I believe their authority is over me, so that I accept their words over and above my own? What's the lesson in there? Cool. Do you want to jump in there? Anything?
No, other than I agree with you that, and this is, I think, the hard part of being human. And I'm speaking entirely from my own skin now and my own life journey, is that I do believe that we create and manifest what we need. And I think we set a lot of it up before we incarnate. And I think a lot of those agreements are made out of love, where someone is going, but I absolutely don't want to abuse you. I love you. Why would I do that to you? And you possibly responding saying, but that's what I need to learn. I need to learn how to stand up for myself, or how to believe in myself, or whatever the particular piece is that we have to learn. And then the trouble is we forget when we incarnate. So I do believe we are responsible for our own stories, and that we have the power to change our own paradigm simply by controlling our responses and learning to become responsive instead of reactive to situations. So, and that takes a lot. It takes a lot for a lot of people to get their head around. But basically, it's, for me, part of that victim cycle. That when we are still holding onto a victim mentality rather than a creator mentality, all sorts of chaos can happen in life, because our belief system is resonating with what's happening. So it's adulting and growing up and like increasing one's frequency it's not for sissies. When we become accountable for our own thoughts and the way we show up, not even in the world, but just within ourselves, when we start doing the work. And that's why I think something like in the 4 agreements, one of those agreements is speak impeccable, use impeccable speech. And that's not just to the outer world. It's how do we talk to ourselves? What dialogue are we having with ourselves? Because if the dialogue we're having with self, like using your example of being stupid, if we're no longer running that program of being stupid, when you tell me I'm stupid, it's just going to bounce off, because there's no capture place for it. Yeah, but it's a process, and it's a huge amount of learning for us to learn to respond.
Hence the saying, I made my own bed, I've got to lie on.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We always have to be careful of the deadly trap of lofty ideals and the belief systems that we hold and where they come from. It's basically the hero's journey. So if we look at any story, and all of this are stories that we tell ourselves. Our history is a story of I'm that, I did that, my name is that, like went through all this crap in life, or I went through all these great things in my life. It's just a story. It was events. We experienced events all over the place, but we personalize that by making it our story. But just because we created the story doesn't mean it's cast in stone. We can always change our story. And the change of the story is in the hero's journey. So in the hero's journey, there's always this little escort. So any story, any movie, anything, all of them will follow the same curve. So you start off, you'll meet somebody, whatever, a friend or whatever, blah, 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 and you're great, and it goes all the way up, and everybody's happy and great, and you best buds and all that kind of stuff. And then it goes down to the bottom, and that same person calls you stupid, and that's where you start that whole descent to the bottom, because now you taking it on, and you believing all the voices in the heads and the negative voices and everybody else's a voice. And somebody in your childhood, your teacher said you're stupid, or your brother or your sister or whatever. So it's just confirmation. So that's all. You go right down to the bottom of that whole victimhood. Yes. And everybody hates me, and like the world is against me, and everything is so moeilijk and so difficult. And if you come from that perspective, everything that you look at, you'll see that. So somebody like takes a gap and goes in front of you, or takes your parking or whatever, even if they first, it's like, see, everybody is like, even they are taking my parking, or they're cutting me off, or they're ignoring me at the till, or you'll make up 1,000 things to prove to yourself that you are a victim, that you are stupid, that nobody sees you. So what happens there, from there? So the Rocky or whatever, he gets clapped, and then he like loses faith in himself or whatever, and he goes down to the bottom. But then he has to start training and running up down the stairs and do 2 million like push-ups on one hand and all that kind of stuff. So that is where we go. So from that low point, and if you look at your awakening and your dark night of the soul, all that kind of stuff, is that from that point is then when you have to take responsibility for your life. Not responsibility as in what happened to you, but responsibility as in being able to respond. So there's an event, how do I respond to that? There's another event, how do I respond to that? That's taking responsibility, because you're responding, because you can choose, and you're taking your power back, and you're being sovereign in your own self and state. Absolutely. And then you can choose yes or no. Then you go all the way up again to the hero. So you get the fleece or the gold or the girl or the whatever it is that now is there, and that's happiness ever after. But once we've gone through that whole journey a couple of times, from victim to perpetrator to victim again, to overcoming the victimhood, to then having a removal and seeing the pattern and seeing the gifts and all that. Once we start seeing that whole thing and start going deeper and remembering who and what we are, then we can become from a trauma survivor, because we all had traumas, so we're all trauma survivors. Can't disagree with that. No matter what your traumas was or your events were and how bad it was, you made it, So you go from a victim to a survivor. Then from a victim to a survivor, to start understanding the process, you start seeing the gifts, then you become trauma hero. Because now you can go into the next trauma when the next trauma comes, because there's going to be an event. Yeah. The next event will come. How are you going to deal with that?
Absolutely.
So if you take the hero's path and you overcome your obstacles and you overcome your difficulties, and you can see that as a repetitive thing and understand that can be from your soul level, your soul family, your soul contracts on the highest level of that. If you start seeing the whole picture, understand all the bodies, that there's the emotional, mental, the energetic, the etheric, the light body, or the causal body, all the bodies, and you can see how all of that develops and how you actually ascending to the light on that path through all of those events and traumas and things. Then eventually you can become a trauma master, where it's just equanimity. So you can go with equanimity and events happen, and you can see it as an event. You call me stupid, I see it as an event. I don't have to take offense. I don't even have to have compassion for you and your place. I just have to actually understand that
where I'm coming from.
That is an event, and it's pointing to me. It's showing something in me. And if I can respond to that, and maybe it's showing me something in me that I still have to work on. Maybe that fine little belief under the belief, the subtle things of inferiority, basically fear and self-loathing, like that little niggly bit that's still sitting somewhere. It's pointing me to that, or else that event wouldn't happen. Because now it can also be the other way. So what was it in the other person? What can you see in them, so that you can notice and acknowledge them for who and what they are, their pain, so now it becomes compassion. So now you can have compassion for the perpetrator, but also compassion for those who still see themselves as victims. You can have compassion for yourself, which is the big one, is to be kind enough to yourself to understand that journey was part of you to make you grow and to come closer to the light.
Now, thank you. Thank you. Now, I fully understand.
There are two pieces I think that are really important. And the one is that impeccable speech in terms of how do we talk to ourselves. And the other is the other agreement of take nothing personally, which reflects the last piece you were saying, that I think when we reach that place of being able to have compassion for the other and almost not be present in what's happening, because we have so mastered the ability to respond rather than react to something, you're then in a very, very, very different place and state of you. And then at that point, I know Ari laughs at me when I call it that, but I know that that's when I'm going to have my master class in whatever it is that I'm learning, because I'll go, okay, I've got this piece of my life under control. And then very soon after that, I'll be in an experience where it's a genuine masterclass of have you actually learned this thing? And I know at that point, if the language I'm using in my own inner world is clean and I'm not taking it personally, that I am at that place of being able to respond rather than react. And then it's almost like they're threads that have tied us up, and that thread gets pulled out. It's almost like it becomes invisible. Yesterday I went to a textile art exhibition, and I learned this wonderful, wonderful thing that there's this fabric that you can sew on. So you might be building up a piece of artwork using threads and little flimsy pieces of, I don't know, cotton or whatever it is. And you can create this artwork. And then you put it in the wash, and the template that you were building it on, which is almost like a piece of cloth, literally washes away in the wash. And I think it's like that once we've learned something and we complete that masterclass, that thread or that building block just gets washed out of us.
Oh,
Nice.
that's cool. That's nice to see. Yeah, awesome.
There's also
Stored all these other stuff, so hovering, taking up the space.
Yeah. All the other
Keep
aspects.
them-
We used to say, I'd bring them up around the fire. So yeah, make like a little stand fear or a sit fear, and all the other asses you bring them out. Because what happens is if we don't acknowledge them, it's like being in the dark and getting clubbed. You don't know who's doing what, who's doing the clubbing. So it will be like victim, the bully, the whatever, that's like, and they come and you think it's you because you having all these thoughts and all these experiences and emotions are coming at you, but it's all like aspects of you. It's part of you, little parts. Now, to help with that is first you make the fire, satfir, because it's comfortable. And then you call them out once in a while, or like one at a time. So you like narrator. So here's narrator, that's the one that's obvious. We all have that one. You say, okay, you sit down there, okay, narrator, whatever, give it a name, whatever you want to call it. You say, okay, I understand that your whole gig and how you helping me is to narrate my life. I'm doing this, I'm going through that, I'm thinking this, I'm feeling this, I'm like whatever. So that's your gig. But cool, thank you for that. And then you get a bully out because he's normally quite present. You're worthless, you can't do this, why don't you do, why can't you look at that? Why do you bump into things, you stupid that, or whatever. He's just like, so you call bully out and you give him a nice name, like Cupcake. You go, how's it, Cupcake? Okay. Because we give him power over us all the time. No, he's also equal, or even just a part. So, how's it, Cupcake? You trying to help me by being harsh with me, by being the strict father, disciplinarian, whatever it is. That is like the way that he's trying to help you. So the bully is not a bad dude. He's just a very limited version of yourself that's trying his utmost best to get you somewhere. And then you'll have Vicky, victim, pull Vicky out. How's it, Vicky? Understand that, yes, your part of helping me is to feel that others are to blame, whatever it is. And then you go through all of them. So those are, I don't know if you have all of those, but you can have the cheerleader, you can have the boss, you can have the good old grandma that supports you and will hold you, the nurturer, the crone, the whatever. Like, so in those are not just your own bits, but it's also all the archetypes. So within the archetypes, so that's the maiden, the wife, the nurturer, the crone, the king, the warrior, from whichever side it is. So, and pretty soon you have a lot of people around your fire. But what that means is that you're not in the dark getting clucked anymore. You are now sitting surrounded with friends, each having their own gig. So if you need something, you'll go to this one. So I've got Darky. He's a bad dude, man. That dude's bad. So, and you don't want him out all the time. But I know that if it's battle time, and that can be battles on many levels, psychic or whatever, then it's like Darky.
pull in.
Pull in, sort this out now. Sort these out now. And normally that's not a good thing. So, but Darky is there. And
I often call. If I'm too afraid to confront something, I call in my courage.
Yes. So that's, yeah. So
and
we all have it.
Mindset changes, and then no one will speak.
Yeah. So whatever you want to call the courageous one, the hero, or the So then you're starting to build up your team, and you understand. Because remember, all the aspects, the core fundamental thing for all of us, we just want to be noticed and acknowledged. So on the deeper survival level, needs to be noticed and acknowledged. But each part of us, each other us, also needs to be noticed and acknowledged. Or else they turn toxic. And that's not a good thing. Or else they go shadow. That's not a good thing. So it's bringing all of those aspects, the good and bad. That's why I said, like, from the highest level, we are all of them. From the highest angelic realms to the lowest of the realms, we're in all of those aspects of us. We don't have to swing from the one to the others. We don't have to personify and live out all of those, but to have them there and to understand them. So I've called training the vampire. The training the vampire can be on a couple of different levels. So the one is the ego. There are parts of you. There are the others that feed on fear and negativity. And for them to feed, they need drama and chaos in their lives, especially in relationships, because that's the easiest way that we get a reflection of who and what we are. And it's like really like if you want events, get into a relationship. So all kinds of events start happening. What is it feeding on? Is it feeding on the fear, anxiety, depression, all those kind of things? Those are all things, entities, energies, parts of us that's feeding on the negative. If it's not in our conscious mind and we don't know ourselves well enough, then they run us. So we're the puppets, and that thing is pulling the strings. So it's either training your dragon or training your vampire, because that vampire sucks and feeds off your fear. And that is taking your life force, putting a negative, fearful aspect to it, or filter to it, and then that is food for the vampire. But to train the vampire is to slowly, like, get him off the fear food and get him onto the love food. Once again, in that spectrum. So every time you feel that filter of moving into the fear range, if you can flip around and see where the love is, and then feed that to Vampy. So you're slowly feeding him on changing his diet. But you're not going to do that like that, because then you're going to have resistance on a very vicious vampire. Because he's controlling you, so he's not going to take that. So you have to be subtle. And as you learn, change all the negativity, you put it at least in neutral. If you can't get it to positive and love, at least get it to a neutral state. And feed the ego the neutral state, feed the vampire more and more neutral. And as his appetite's changing, then your filters will change. And as you change your filters, the appetite changes. So there's a a loop, feedback loop in those. And as your outlook on the world becomes more positive, you'll see more and more positive things, or at least neutral things, and then positive things. And then all of a sudden, at one stage, Grandpa won't want any of the negativity anymore because he's actually now chowing Lani food. He's not eating out the bin anymore. He's like having his 5-course, 10-course meals, 5-star like boost meals. So he's not going back to the bins. As that whole thing change, you change, your belief systems change, because those are all in the belief systems. So once you change your belief systems from everything's going to hell in a handbasket, everything is just, the world is the worst thing ever, to like, okay, well, maybe that's not completely true, because not everybody is like a mad psychopathic maniac, because there's a lot of people on earth. So if everybody's like that, well, we'll really be in hell. There might be 1 or 2 of them, but 99% of the other people are actually just really good, kind people.
I think the conversation was a very nice mirroring of the trauma beings and our parts. That, on some level, there's quite a strong reflection between the two. Because when our parts are unconscious and unrealized, they run us and rule us like beings of the underworld do when they get in. So, let's say we're occupied by a ghost or whatever it might be. It's not a far cry from our inner critic our inner or our control freak. It's a very similar thing, and that piece for me around integration is so important. That as long as we are exiling our parts and dismissing aspects of ourselves, we can't move towards wholeness and healing. It's only when we start really integrating and having the conversations that you're talking about and setting up the campfires that you mentioned, and that we really start to heal and become whole. And I think an important piece for me in that is that when we have those conversations with a part of ourselves, it's very useful to try and get an idea of when that part came into being. So let's say, for example, our control freak. I had a conversation with myself not so long ago, and I asked the control freak how old she was when she manifested, and she was only 10. So that means I'm a 57-year-old woman being governed by a 10-year-old's energy, which is completely, it just doesn't work in who we are and how we are as human beings. So even if the conversation and the campfire discussions are just to update our parts to today, and because it would be better if my control freak were 57, because there's so much stuff she would have disposed of between 10 and now. So I think it's a very useful part in working with the integration of our parts to try and get a sense of when they stepped in and when they started playing that role. And then the other piece of it is that once we've learned to identify them and engage with them, and because all of them, the same as the beings of the underworld, have all stepped in to be of service to us. They all have most often come as a response to trauma, and they've come to assist and help us. They've just got frozen in time. And it's very much like the beings of the underworld that have come to assist us at normally our request. that have also got frozen in time, although that timeline can be so much longer. So I think I think that part of the conversation and anything that we have to do with our parts is really useful to try and get an age so that you can update your operating system. And then when they reach the end of their life, or they no longer are in service of, they're no longer in service of you in a good, healthy way, to have a conversation about reassigning them to a job that is going to serve you. So for instance, also in a conversation I had relatively recently, I've reassigned what was a loyal soldier to help me with my art and my poetry. So we are now in a relationship that's mutually beneficial, rather than being in an opposing relationship where the push and the pull is not harmonious for the whole. So I just wanted to reflect that I think where this conversation has gone is very interesting in terms of it starting off with beings of the underworld and ending at this place of our own inner beings, and how similar they are. And getting back to that thing that I was saying of equality and greeting everyone with humility and humbleness so that we can integrate and become more in the process.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, 100%. Because I think what you're saying is very true, because all those other us's, Vicky, Cupcake, all of them, they are coping mechanisms that we developed at some point where we experience pain. And that would normally be in the early childhood stages. We helpless when we come in here, and that's why the core thing is noticed and acknowledged. So when you're not noticed and acknowledged, and you perceive that as a traumatic experience or a painful experience, there is that freezing in time of that aspect of you. So there will be 2-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, whatever in your life, but a lot of them is between 0 and 7, because all those other us's is definitely parts of you, and they're trying to help you, but they're trying to help you from their vantage point. So a 6-year-old will see it in a certain way. A 3-year-old will see it in a different way. Maybe Bully or Cupcake will be a terrible 2, or whatever it is, demanding that they get their own way. And that's why we say you're being childish. Because when you react, when there's no responsibility being able to respond to, and there's pure reaction, we turn very childish. If you look at 2 adults fighting, it's like, really? Or just look at politicians. Okay, but we shift all those. And different guys come, say in one, say that we have an argument with our spouse or whoever. All of these will pop in and out. So you'll turn from Vicky to Bully to the hero to whatever in the middle of one sentence, because they're hitting pain points in you, and you're triggering back to those freeze points. So remember, whenever there's a major trauma in life, there's a freezing of that state. So it's like, if you look at your life as picture, 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 in this picture, there was an event that happened at whatever, 10-year-old. There was a major event that happened. It was perceived as literally survival and life-threatening, and it was directly influencing your survival. So complete fear, and very fundamental, very visceral fear. So whenever we get to a complete fear and overwhelming pain, all the senses open up, all 9 senses, and gets flooded by information, and that's overwhelming. When you're completely overwhelmed, basically you're shutting down and you're freezing. So it's literally freezing that person, that child, in that moment, mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, spiritually, whatever it is, it's a complete freeze in time and space. And then as we go through life and we get triggered here as a 57-year-old or 20-year-old or whatever it is, you straight back into that 10-year-old with all those fears and helplessness and frustration, but also with the coping mechanism that they develop, that tool that they develop to be able to survive that event or that trauma is the tool that you're going to be picking up. So we're picking up 2-year-olds' tools of survival, which doesn't work for us later in life anymore. But we haven't looked at them, we haven't acknowledged them, we haven't learned the lesson, and we haven't transmuted it and transformed that. Because any of these can be reprogrammed, retrained, but only if it's in the light.